Hello and welcome to the session on Project Scope Management. Scope management is one of the 10 knowledge areas in PMP. Managing project scope, gathering requirements, and meeting customers' expectations are a major part of a project manager's work. Weaknesses and deficiencies in the scope definition process, including incomplete or poorly executed stakeholder analysis and mishandled communication, can lead to unnecessary and costly changes, rework, and even project failures. As a key part of the triple constraints, scope is often the most challenging constraint to manage. As a project progresses, scope creep often occurs due to the lack of management of the constant changes. Customers' needs, the project sponsor's needs, and other stakeholders' needs often are in conflict. Let us learn how to achieve project success by mastering requirements definition and scope control. In this session, we will learn how project scope management is planned through plan scope management process. We will learn the difference between product scope and project scope. We will also define the inputs, outputs, and tools and techniques of the scope management processes. Then we will move on to identify and apply the proper methodology to effectively define the scope of a project, then create a work breakdown structure to decompose the scope into smaller components which would be easy to manage and estimate. We will also discuss the different forms of work breakdown structure and how it helps project managers. Along with work breakdown structure, we will also see work breakdown structure dictionary and its role in scope definition and scope management. Subsequently, we will learn about the scope validation by the customer or sponsor in validate scope process, and finally learn how to control the scope. In the project context, the term scope can refer to product scope as well as project scope. The difference between the product scope and the project scope is one of the most confusing topics in project management that generally makes many people perplexed, and it is difficult for them to distinguish between these two terms. I also often see in many PMP forums and in PMP group emails that people are asking questions such as what is the project scope and what the product scope is. There are replies to this query, but many a times the replies are not up to the expectation of the inquirer. Let's see the definitions of both of them. Project scope includes all the work needed to be done to create a product or deliver a service or result. The project scope is all about the project. It defines the requirements of products, the work required to create the product, and defines what is in the scope and what is not. The project scope is also known as scope statement or statement of work. On the other hand, product scope is the characteristics, features, or function of the product, service, or result that is to be created. It is basically the outcome of the project. The product scope is all about the product. How will it look like? How will it function? Etc. Let me explain this to you by a school building example. The client comes and asks you to construct a school building for them. He gave you his requirements, like what would be the size of the school building, how many rooms it will have, size of the playground, number of toilets, color of painting, when he needs it, etc. You take the project and start working on it. You make the plan, create the schedule, and estimate the budget. Subsequently, you move on to the execution part. You bring workers to the site and start constructing the school building. You complete the project and verify with client that the school building is as per his requirements. Then you hand over the school building to the client, get the payment, and then the project is closed. In the above example, there are two parts. In the first part, client asks you to make a school building for him and gives you his requirements, that is the characteristics he wants in the school building. This school building is the product, and the requirements for this product are known as scope. Therefore, in the first part, what he gave you is the product scope. In the second part, you work to construct the school building within the given time and budget, meeting all the client's requirements by following the project management plans. Lastly, you deliver it to the client. In this part, what you have done to construct the school building is the project scope. Now, when we have understood the difference between product scope and project scope, let's understand what project scope management is all about. Setting a scope is one of the first project management processes completed during the planning phase, as it defines outcomes and deliverables. It is a part of creating a vision for the team and the stakeholders. Determining the scope of the project is a very challenging process. How scope is determined and how easy or difficult the process will be dependent on a lot of factors. For example, if a project is implementing new technology or a relatively new type of service, the requirements gathering process may take longer to complete. Prototyping, focus groups, and proof of concept work may need to be done first to establish feasibility factors before scope can be set. On the other hand, a project with stable requirements and relatively well-known technology or services can be much easier to plan. Moreover, depending on how well stakeholders communicate and plan their work environment, setting a scope can be quite smooth, or it can take many rounds of negotiation. Project scope changes can impact the project schedule and costs differently depending on when the changes are implemented in the project's life cycle. During project initiation, when the scope is being developed, any additions to the project scope will have the least impact on the project schedule or cost, because the schedule and cost estimating have not been finalized and no work will need to be discarded. During the planning phase, changes to the scope will have more of an impact on the schedule and cost, because they will probably require added planning. This additional planning will require people resources and extra time to make adjustments to the plan. Added planning may also include added analysis of an IT system, changes to engineering drawings, and additional purchase requisitions, etc. All these tasks will add to the project's cost and create delays in the schedule. These are the couple of reasons which necessitates scope management. Project scope management is all about managing the scope and defining the work to be done for building the desired product. Coming to the definition of project scope management, it includes the processes required to ensure that the project includes all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. Please note the phrase only the work required to complete. This means that project scope must include only the work that needs to be done to achieve the project objectives. PMP does not approve any extra work to be done over and above what is required to be done. Now, the question comes, why we manage scope? Normally, in any project, there are constraints which need to be taken care of throughout the project, and the project's success or failure is measured based on these factors. These constraints are time, scope, and cost. These constraints are always competing against each other during the execution of the project. Project manager must integrate all aspects of the project to manage the interaction of time, cost, scope, and quality constraints for project success. In this session, we need to understand the effect of a scope on the other two constraints. Project scope change affects the other two constraints in different manners depending on the phase in which the scope change is being implemented in the project. During the initial phase, when the scope is being defined, any change in the scope will have least impact on the project cost or schedule, as Both of them have not been finalized yet, and no work has yet been done. During the planning phase, scope change will impact schedule and cost, as additional planning would be required, which would need more resources and extra time to make the changes to the plan. Once the project work has started, scope changes will substantially increase the cost and delay the project's schedule. Another negative impact of scope change is the impact on the team morale. In my experience, changes made later in the life cycle of a project can create negative feelings within the team, which can have a detrimental effect on team dynamics, teamwork, morale, and the overall organization. These are the reasons why project scope management forms a very important part of project management.